Okay, welcome again to another episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. Tashi Miller here from Warrior Concepts here in East Central Pennsylvania. So let's go ahead and jump right in. If you've been binge watching these things, you're probably tired of me saying the same thing at the very beginning, but we have to kind of set things up just in case somebody discovers it for the first time. But I do have to say that this week's training is related to, right? Actually springboards off of last week's Whiteboard Wednesday. If you caught it, great. If not, you can always catch it on the replay or whatever. Last week we took a look at energy conservation and things that we could do or that could get in our way that could actually burn off or use up energy, waste time, those kind of things that that could make things kind of go sideways for us and not work out so well. This is very much related, but we're going to be taking a look at other things. Are they connected? Absolutely, right? But I'm not going to talk about the energy part so much, excess movement, missed shots, those kind of things. This time what we're going to be doing is taking a look at other types of gaps and what I'm calling hidden traps in self-defense training. Okay, so in martial arts, specifically self-defense oriented martial arts. And I know I always trigger people because there's always this contention that like everything's, for self-defense. I'm not splitting hairs, right? I'm also not having a conversation with my 5-year-old grandson about the way my engine in my car works, okay? So unless we can have a same level conversation, this is not going to work so well, okay? So let me be very, very clear about this. Some people and some martial arts, while they are fight things and while people are fighting, it's not necessarily the same thing as a life or death self-protection scenario, okay? There's a whole bunch of differences, right? And we're not splitting hairs on those today. I have plenty of articles and all those kind of things out that people can kind of catch up on, right? But for instance, right, I would never say that somebody who is really, really good at collegiate level or even high school level wrestling, right, could not defend themselves, that they couldn't use that to handle a situation. But collegiate or high school level wrestling is not designed for self-defense, okay? And the same could be said for either many different martial arts in when they were created, right? And based on the intent of the creator, and but there's also folks that are training, whether they're training in a combat-oriented or historically combat-related martial art, their intent makes all the difference. Okay, some people are just training because they want to earn a black belt in the martial arts or in a martial art. Not really all that specific, right? A lot of people get politically connected or all jazzed or jacked or whatever about any given martial art being best. But if you research back, what ended up happening was they chose the closest school that was acceptable to them in between home and work because they didn't want to have to put in extra time, right? Once they got home at night on the easy chair, after they got whatever after dinner and they were done. Same thing, same reason people don't want to go to the gym after a certain point. They'd rather do it just on the way to work or on the way home or whatever, and then they get themselves emotionally, egocentrically attached to this particular martial art as best, when the reality was it was a fucking accident, right? They chose it because of convenience, or they chose it because their brother's college roommate's Uncle Bob's sister's husband said it was best, okay? So not splitting hairs, okay? In a self-protection situation where there are no do-overs, you can't talk smack after losing and ask for a rematch, okay? Just like most sparring, the way most people are used to seeing sparring, while it serves its purpose, it tends to lean toward a one-to-one contest kind of thing, right? Like I can't break my partner's neck. I can't shove a thumb in his eye socket, right? Well, you got to have rules. Well, then it's not self-defense. It's not self-preservation, keeping myself or somebody else alive, that kind of thing. Sparring also typically does not involve like, let's do some knife fighting as our sparring, okay? Let's do, it'll be me against like 5 guys that they can do whatever they want, and I have to worry about legal liability. Well, shit, right? So very, very different, right? Okay, so if you caught this week's Kuden podcast, again, the theme is the same, right? So it was all based on a lesson that I got from Hatsumi Sensei years and years and years ago that kind of got summed up in a quote that he said. This thing kind of stuck with me, and then I had to take some time to figure it out, right? Because it sounds kind of backwards. It sounds like a logic quiz or a brain teaser or something, right? What he said was, is if you cannot do what you cannot do when you must, you'll die, okay? And I know it sounds like I just stuttered, right? I didn't say the same thing twice. I actually said two different things, okay? One has to do with intention and will. One has to do with your actual ability to create, to do your techniques. But one also has to do with things possibly going wrong where we get in our own way. And I don't mean intentionally, okay? Now, the point of this training, today's training, is to make us aware of potential gaps and things that are absolutely missing in most martial arts training, okay? And if we're only looking at the scrolls and we're only looking at the techniques, we're only looking at the formalized skills, then we're missing about, I don't know, Hatsumi Sensei said 90% of the training, okay? So we need to, well, you'll see, right? Kind of come up with some things here. So I know you got some weird kind of words here. I just sum things up to what you cannot do, right? When you absolutely have to, will get you killed. I don't care what your rank is. I don't care how good you are with your techniques in a dojo. And I know how flustered or controversial that sounds, but that's okay. Sometimes my job is just to freaking wake people up or make them crawl back into their hole and just be comfortable doing what they're doing and hope that life never catches up and punches them in the throat, okay? So we're going to take a look at the problems here are 5 cannot do's, okay? 5 areas where our own system, body, mind, emotions, these different aspects, we'll go into those in a moment, okay? Take a look at a couple of what's and how's, right? That happens. There's one what and the rest of them are how that kind of happens, right? We're going to take a look at some training activities, some things that you could do to counter that, right? But it has to be inserted into your training. So a big part of this is in recognizing where things could go wrong, where our system could backfire on us, no matter how good we are in the dojo, no matter how high our rank is, no matter how confident we are, okay? In that moment, when the stress level goes way beyond what we're typically used to handling, right? The adrenals kick in and what the hell starts short-circuiting, or what natural processes based on any one of these things, okay? Because when we talk about natural, people walk around very, very pridefully, right? In the Bundokan and in ninjutsu in general. I'm Taishian in the Bundokan, so I'm not knocking any of this stuff. But the intent behind it, yeah, I'm punching that one square in the face, right? They walk around all prideful, quoting Hatsumi Sensei, right? It's all natural. It's about natural movement, natural response, and yeah. But there's a bunch of hidden natural responses too, which can cause our system to backfire on itself. And if we're not careful, we don't touch that in our training, and then what ends up happening is that natural thing will naturally override all this shit that we think we know. So what we have to do is recognize it and then go in with training, certain types of training, drills and response kind of things and all kinds of things, right? To literally, almost like a doctor, right? Inoculate ourselves against these things. Some we're going to be able to rewire so that the thing we want to come out will come out. Some things we're going to have to recognize and give ourselves kind of a pre-plan that when that happens, X happens, we do Y. And other things we're not going to be able to do anything about. We're going to have to manage it so that it doesn't shock us and get in the way. Right? It's just the way it works, right? And this is not my opinion. This is decades of training in this art, other ones training in other fight systems and whatnot, and being a federal cop and a bodyguard, actually physically having to deal with jackasses that want to take mine or somebody else's life. Okay, so we're here talking about it not because I have this, but because of this other experience. Okay, and I only ever trained with teachers that focused in that direction. Okay, just because they had a black belt, just because there was a certain martial arts name behind it, or they were a celebrity, or everybody knew them and their to look good, or that, those all were secondary things. Okay, so again, Hatsumi Sensei's quote, right? If you cannot do what you cannot do when you must, you will die, right? Okay, so the problem starts here. The problem starts where most martial artists, most self-defense students and practitioners, right, train in controlled environments. Okay? I know some people spar, still controlled, right? The training's still controlled, however, right? What I mean is calm, focused, and able to execute techniques smoothly, that kind of thing. But one of my teachers used to say, the kata is not the fight. Even a sparring match, it's not. It's not a life or death survival situation. We know that going in. That's why we can do half the shit that we do in that kind of realm, right? That's why randori is not sparring. Sorry, doesn't even equate. It's not even a direct translation. Okay, and the dojo or the self-defense classroom environment, backyard, wherever you're training, isn't the fight environment. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things that need to be worked in, right? Else something could happen that we didn't plan for or adjust for or work into our skill set, and then when it occurs, panic starts to set in, right? And we start bleeding off energy and all kinds of other things go on. Brain locks up. Okay, for instance, right, if you always train indoors and you don't train outdoors, and then you're doing your cool move and you trip over an exposed root or a little divot in the ground or whatever, and then you're going down to the ground, it's amazing how many people are really, really good at rolling, really, really good at footwork and shifting and kamae and whatnot, unless something surprising happens. And all of a sudden they crash and burn, and then they're moving just like everybody else. Okay, so we've got to be careful, right? So during this class, we're going to be exposing and examining some of these critical gaps, right? Some of these hidden traps in most people's training, right? I consider myself extremely lucky to have trained with the people that I have, but I'm still constantly learning other things. Watch a news story, see how an attack happened, and better work that into my repertoire, okay? Because obviously the world just showed me a possibility, okay? And so this is also setting the foundation for Friday's masterclass, where we're going to do a couple of techniques, but the majority of class is going to center around 3 training drills or drill scenarios that I was introduced to, and we're going to continue to use these things. I'll share them with everybody in a way that puts the body in a state that can cause a short circuit to happen. It'll put the mind in a state that can cause the body or the mind to short circuit. And one of them is specifically designed to create an overwhelm situation where there's so much input coming in that it will expose gaps where we're going to have to train in certain ways so that we can filter out the unnecessary, learn how to actually prioritize without doing what the brain does, which is tunnel vision. Because if I'm tunnel vision, right, under pressure, my vision narrows. It's just the way it works, right? Which means that my peripheral vision doesn't run out here. It runs out farther inside, which means somebody can blindside me much easier, okay? All right, so anyway, right? So what we're gonna be doing is we're gonna be stress testing reaction, movement, and mental clarity under pressure, because that's where it matters, okay? So again, before we start, everybody knows the game here, right? Like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. If you're in the Selinsgrove, Sunbury area of Pennsylvania, in the East Central, or the hell are we? We're the Central Susquehanna Valley, right? And you want to do some cool training and all that. You can either go on the website, or you can local website, not this one, Selinsgrove Martial Art, there you go. Or give us a call and whatnot, and just get some information about the 6-week Protect Yourself and Others intro to see if that's even if it's even a good fit. Okay. Anyway, all right. Let's go ahead and jump in. Today we're going to be taking a look at 5 categories. There we go. 5 categories of call them 5 problems, but they're 5 categories of cannot do's. Okay, where things backfire. All right. So we're going to take a look at physical breakdown under stress. Right. That's how your body betrays you. Mental paralysis and overthinking. Right. That's the mind trying to catch up to chaos. Right. We're going to take a look at energy leaks and inefficiency. Right. How wasted movement will and can cost you. We're going to take a look at threat perception errors. Right. So notice there's going to be a couple of things on here that are mind. There's going to be a couple of things on here that are body. Some are tied into the senses more than the processor. Right. So threat perception errors, right? What you think you see versus actually what's going on, right? And we're going to take a look at a category that I call spiritual or belief-based limitations. And this is the mind as your greatest weapon or your worst enemy, right? So, all right, so we'll go into each one of these things. But before we do that, let's answer a question here, okay? Why bother, right? There's lots of people that are learning self-defense, that are learning fight systems and whatever for sport, for all these kind of things, and they've been attacked and they've done just fine, right? So do we actually have to do this stuff? No, okay. But as Hatsumi Sensei once said when we were talking about the mind science stuff, somebody said, "Do we actually have to do that stuff?" He goes, "No." And they smiled and walked away, and then he looked at the rest of it and said, "You don't have to breathe either, but we highly recommend it." Right. So what people are often looking for is the easy track, and that's fine, right? But lots of people luck their way through life, right? Just because that happened doesn't mean that they were prepared in any way, right? So do we have to? No. However, right? However, so before we jump into these 5, I got one more Hatsumi Sensei quote for you, just in case there's somebody watching that needs my credibility to rest on me saying Sensei said. Okay, but here's another lesson, right? What he said at one point was, many people practice martial arts as though they will always be calm, in control, and balanced. Okay, but life and death are chaos. The one who survives is the one who has trained for what others ignore. Right? This is not about winning and losing. This is about being it's not about being invincible. It's about being the hardest person in any room or environment to kill. Right? We're all easy to kill. Right? But it's also about just surviving a little longer. Okay? Making it through. Okay? Knowing we're going to get hit, we're going to get stabbed, we're going to get shot. If those are the things that are involved, our job is not to have those things not happen, right? Our job is to have those things not happen to the degree where the TV gets turned off, right? Or we're a vegetable for the rest of our lives, okay? So anyway, all right, so let's jump into this, right? So what are the 5 categories of what you cannot do? Because if you do them or they happen, they'll get you killed, right? So the first one is this physical breakdown under stress, right? And again, stress is the big key here. Okay, stress is the big key. Anybody can do anything well when the conditions are right. I had military leaders tell me that. I remember one time I was fairly new to the military and got out of basic training, got to this new unit, whatnot, and I didn't like field duty. If I wanted to be an infantry guy, I'd have signed up to be an infantry guy. But ultimately, when the shit hits the fan, and we used to say when the balloon goes up, we're all infantry, right? We just might be operating other vehicles or whatever. So there was this big field exercise coming up, and I just, oh man, this thing's like a week long, and 3 days of it, we weren't allowed to sleep, right? There's a test for you, right? And we all got word that there was this big ass weather pattern coming in, like torrential rains and all that, and I made the cardinal mistake looking at one of the senior NCOs, non-commissioned officers, and I said, "Well, I guess that'll be postponed." He went, "No." And I'm like, But he goes, no. I've been praying for bad weather. Why would you do that? He said, because anybody can do this stuff when it's easy, when the conditions are perfect, right? When the conditions are absolutely shitty and everything is going against you, that is when you need to be able to do it. Because if you can do it then any other condition less than that should be a cakewalk. So that's a different mindset, right? It's a different mindset. It's different from somebody who is, let's say, training for a fight, right? And then they've got all this time, weeks, months, whatever, pump up, change the diet, get themselves in it, because they're going to get in there and this fight's going to last a certain amount of time. They've done research on the opponent, all that kind of stuff, right? And they're fighting for the same prize, and there's a kind of a sterile environment in there where there's a ref to make sure it's fair, and there's all these eyeballs on, there's a big old paycheck and that kind of stuff. Not the same when you don't know who the attacker is going to be, what they're going to come at you with, the knowledge that this could be over in 10 minutes or less. Statistically, 2 to 10 seconds is the average self-defense scenario. Okay, so it's not the same, right? So what we're really talking about here is how your body betrays you. And one of the big things that I learned a long time ago, and it was going through the Mikyo training, the mind science training, is that we martial artists, there are these 5 categories of things that make us up, right? So feelings, perceptions, conceptualizations, that kind of thing, right? But there's also this form, right? Body and whatnot. And we're really high in certain areas and very crappy in other areas. And one of the areas that we're really high in is we're control freaks, okay? So we absolutely, like, we tend to be image oriented and all that kind of stuff, which is why the majority of fighter types and martial arts types don't like some fat old bald guy teaching a lesson, right? Because I'm not a good image for the martial arts. Okay, well, what about self-defense and survival? Same thing. Yeah, no, okay. Anyway, nice talking to you. Judgmental, those kind of things, right? But we like to believe that we're absolutely in control of all of our faculties. Okay, and somebody has to be way bigger, way more dangerous, whatever, to be able to do anything to us. But sorry, our bodies can backfire ourselves. Okay, so here's how this happens, right? This all goes down to the adrenal response. Everything we're talking about here is going to be wrapped around the adrenal response and what it does to different faculties, different processes, whether it's organs, the neural network, all kinds of things. Okay, so when the adrenal response kicks in, right, what people often call fight or flight, but we know that it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? It's not one or the other. There's a right, so the energy can be locked up and stalled, right? But when it kicks in, our bodies undergo involuntary physiological changes. That means you don't get to choose. Okay, these changes are designed from the cave for survival. Okay, but they often work against us if we don't train for them. If we don't work this into our training. Okay, see, I'm already watching numbers go up and numbers go down and stuff, and I get it that people might be listening in during their workday and stuff like that. But as soon as this gets a little bit on the cerebral side, a lot of people just drop off because, again, martial artists, like a lot of fitness-oriented people, tend to be high in the form body kind of thing, but maybe not so. Okay, and they don't want to have to think about it. Okay, great. So figure it out, right? Be the biggest caveman in the cave and hope that human beings got to where we are at this point in evolution, not because we were the biggest beast or the meanest beast. It's because of this thing, right? So anyway, all right, so we're talking about survival, right? So the reality of the adrenal dump is that a couple of things can happen, probably will happen to some degree, right? So dizziness, disorientation, right? So that's mental factors, except that what is dizziness? Dizziness has happened because we're probably hyperventilating, and not only is it affecting our brain, it's affecting organs, it's affecting oxygen transfer and the negative gases in and out of the muscles and the cells so we can operate the way we need to. What else is going on? This is affected by rapid and shallow breathing, increased heart rate. Heart rate goes up. That changes how we respond and operate, right? And muscle response and shakiness, right? So we got some muscle stuff going on, right? Shakiness. If anybody's been ever highly stressed or heartbroken or all kinds of things where the system is being attacked, okay? So let's go back through these things very, very quickly, right? Dizziness and disorientation, right? Blood rushes away from the brain and into the large muscle groups, and this in and of itself affects balance and coordination, right? It's kind of the same reason, like it's freaking almost the end of February here, and I'm waiting for spring to show up, and we're in our little February polar vortex here. So things are in the low 20s, they're in the teens overnight. Thank goodness we got through the negative numbers. But to protect, the reason why people end up with frostbite and shit falling off their body is because when we get cold like that, the body pulls the blood away from the extremities to keep the core life functions, right, warm, so that supposedly we can stay alive. But shit starts freezing, and then it just, in an attempt to save us, the body will often, like, it will hold it for a while, and then just that same response is the thing that kills us. Okay. Rapid shallow breathing, right? Hyperventilation leads to lightheadedness, loss of fine motor control. Please remember that, right? If you look at your techniques, okay? I know what Hatsumi Sensei does, but he's also teaching at a very, very, very high level where he's gotten through all of this stuff to where that there is not a stress inducement because he is in absolute control of things. So he gets some of that fine motor skill back. But if you look at most of your techniques, okay, most of them are using large muscle groups and maintaining that, because under pressure, we lose fine motor skills and we're limited to gross motor functions, including mental faculties. So that's not accounted for in the training, and we're expecting that we're going to be able to do stuff like that. We're going to find that we may end up crapping ourselves, right? So increased heart rate, right? This in and of itself can cause tunnel vision, right? Because the faculty, you're not getting blood where it needs to go, and so the faculties start narrowing and shutting down, okay? Auditory exclusion, which means you don't hear so well, right? Things have to be louder because we're now tuned in for we don't want to be, we don't care about leaves fluttering in the trees when the wind blows, but a growling beast that could eat us, that's right, that's more important. Okay. Difficulty in assessing threats accurately, right? Because again, the higher blood, right? The blood's now moving through the organs, including the brain, faster. So the transfer of nutrients and blood, or nutrients and oxygen, to the cell, through the cell membranes and stuff like that, isn't happening as well because the blood's racing through faster. Okay. So again, I have weird hobbies, but you don't need to know all that stuff. You just need to know that shit happens, right? Okay. And then the muscle response and shakiness, hands may tremble, knees may feel weak, and movement can become jerky instead of fluid. And that's because not just the bigger muscles, but the smaller muscles, right? If they're functioning in an arrhythmic way, you're not going to use your legs as well as you normally do, and moving is problematic and stuff like that. This is the shit that in our systems, I've been covering Koppo to you and the Koppo Jutsu with students here of late, and like attacking the hips and the spine and whatnot in a way that makes it so that their legs don't work so well, right? Or their joints, right, don't work the way they're supposed to. So even when they land shots, they can't create the kind of damage that you can, right? So this is the stuff we do to them. We have to make sure that we're actually in a condition where we're able to do that, okay? So this stuff, so the TAs over here, these training adjustments, right? What kind of things can we do to help to neutralize this stuff or to work with it so that we're actually functioning naturally, right? Now, remember, what I said was we're making sense out of chaos, okay? So what that means is that we're going to have to, part of our training needs to be to get to an instinctive, intuitive level where the right brain is leading, okay? But remember also what I said, that martial artists and self-defense people tend to be high on the control freak side, okay? Which means they're trying to control the world and lead with left brain, okay? Except that after certain speed levels or intensity levels or stress levels, left brain's going to go, fuck it, you handle this, I'll be back, right? And then, okay, so, well, then what the hell? Well, see, what we're doing in the training is using the left brain to control the training process so that shit gets where it's supposed to go, so that we don't need the left brain for more than little spotlight, insight, little things along the way, because it's not going to be available for anything else. Okay? If we don't understand that little thing, then we're going to be controlling the training thinking that we're going to be controlling the fight. We're not controlling the fight that way, right? So, one, we can learn to recognize these systems and use breath control to stabilize yourself, right? A lot of these things here are handled, right, by breath control. But this isn't the, well, I mean, part of it, learning breath control, right, is a training adjustment, but it's learning to recognize when we are, okay? But here's the cool thing. You don't have to be in the dojo, and we don't have to be doing a martial arts or self-defense training drill for you to practice this, okay? We have lots of opportunities. Kids ill, teenagers barking like they're in control of the house, get our heart broken, mom or dad, grandma or grandpa dies, somebody we're really, really close to, there's a shift at work and there's the threat of not having a job, whatever, right? Stress. So we can practice whenever these things come up instead of hoping we're not letting ego fake it in the dojo and actually get the real thing happening. Okay. Second thing we can do is train under progressively stressful conditions to inoculate our nervous system to the chaos. Okay. We have to get desensitized to the chaos. Right. So desensitized to the chaos. Like when you first learned how to drive a car, right? They wouldn't let you out of a parking lot, I bet, or the driveway, right? But then you go to a parking lot, then they take you to a parking lot where there's cars. And then they take you out on back roads and then secondary roads. And finally you're on the freaking highway. And so speed's picking up and all that. But at the very beginning, this is all new. You're like imitating somebody you saw drive before. And then how difficult can it be? I press on the accelerator. Oh, shit, that's too fast, right? And then as soon as it goes too fast, what ends up happening? The leg locks up and keeps the accelerator pressed in, even though your brain is thinking you got to go to the brake, but you can't disengage your leg, okay? Anybody experience things like that? Driving down or driving wherever you are and looking in the rearview mirror, looking at the side view mirror, looking at the speedometer, and trying to figure out how the hell anybody who drives can keep all this shit straight. I got lines over here, I got lines over here, I got to keep it centered, I got to watch the speed, I got to watch out for other assholes on the road. Holy, how the hell do you, okay? Well, we ended up getting desensitized to the chaos. And we started making sense out of things. And we started prioritizing what is baseline. So this is cool, this is normal, right? And then your brain notices somebody, coming into a stop sign or an intersection too quickly, and they end up stopping last second or whatever, because they're probably fucking scrolling on their phone or texting or whatever. But they come in there, but brain kicks up, muscles start to fire, getting ready to adjust the wheel, foot might even come off the accelerator, getting ready for the brake, that kind of thing, right? It's the same process, except instead of doing it accidentally, we're trying to do it intentionally, okay? Right. So this is what we're going to focus on Friday. We're going to have those stressful conditions created so that we will see how that affects the system and how now we need to be mindful of, right? And why certain training drills and things that people go, I don't do that in Japan. You go to every class for every instructor in Japan, Well, no, I only train with Hatsumi Sensei. Oh, well, you do know that he's only teaching the 10th to 15th dons, right? Everybody else gets a free ride. Okay? And you're supposed to be training with somebody who can translate that so you can do it that way. No. Okay. Anyway, and then the third thing is focus on gross motor skills over fine motor skills that require too much precision under duress. Okay. So we're going to focus on gross motor skills. The cool thing is that the more experience you get, the better you get at doing things under pressure. Some of those faculties do come back. See, that's the problem with people who are not at that level, but they think they can skip over a whole bunch of training to imitate Hatsumi Sensei when he was teaching, or the master teachers or whatever, when they're just missing a whole bunch of stuff that got those people where they are. Okay. So I know, man, I get it. I've been there, right? Ego wants to do things a certain way, right? It wants to look a certain way, okay? And then we get throw punched by life. Anyway, all right, so let's move to the next one, right? Mental paralysis. Mental paralysis. Okay. So what we're looking at here is overthinking, right? We'll be talking about the mind again here. I think it's number 4, but so what we're talking about here is the mind trying to catch up to the chaos. It's trying to catch up because certain things happened in the processing and we missed what was actually going on. It's kind of like, I don't know, have you ever been watching TV, sport game, or maybe in a movie or whatever, right? And you thought you just blinked, but all of a sudden, like, not only is the scene different, if you're watching Netflix or whatever, you can hit the pause button and realize, holy shit, I just like started watching it and it's 45 minutes in. How the hell did that happen? Okay. Well, because there was a disconnect, right? Not necessarily for overthinking, but same thing happens if I'm watching something or I'm trying to read or whatever, and somebody's talking in my ear and I'm trying to pay attention to them. I'm trying to do 2 things at one time and it's not working, right? Something's going to drop off. Okay. So here's what's going on. When the brain is overwhelmed by unexpected danger, it struggles to process information quickly enough. Okay. And here's what happens, right? Again, most people think that they've got all this control. Okay. But they're processing things from the neocortex, this later in evolution developed part of the brain that allows us to think that we are smart, right? And we are, okay? But it's slower. It uses a whole bunch of fine calculations and things like that. But by the time that thing recognizes danger, we're something's lunch, okay? So we have these primitive functions, right, in the R complex, the reptilian brain, and the lower mammalian functions that are based on survival. One of these things is known as the amygdala, okay? The amygdala, spelled amygdala, but it's not the princess from Star Wars, right? So amygdala, right, it is your early warning sensor. It's kind of like the sensor on the outside lights at the garage or whatever, that when somebody or a rabbit gets near it or whatever, boom, turns the lights on, okay? So it just has a simple function, right? You tell it what's supposed to be dangerous in the modern world, but it's already wired for the shit that would have eaten us in the ancient world, okay? And then when it gets tripped, it sends a signal to the hypothalamus, which dumps a whole shit ton of chemicals and whatnot into our system, changes our state mentally and physically. And see, that takes some transition time, okay? And depending on how often and how, we'll start with how often that happens, right? Determines how long it takes you to get on track with the new focus. Okay, so there's a cognitive lag time because of this shock and awe kind of thing, right? And part of the purpose of training, certain types of training, is to get that gap as small as possible, knowing that you can't make it go away. There's a natural part of that transition from everyday life to fight, flight, or, right? Take my attention off of it. We're either going to starve or it's going to kill me. Okay. So part of it is that, unless we're not training for it, like if we don't even know that we're supposed to train for it, well, then once you're shocked, how long is it going to take you to get back? Some people, we have conversations with people all the time, right? They're still carrying trauma that somebody said something to them at 10 a.m. 4 fucking months ago. I can't get past it. Why would they have said something? Bang. They're not fucking functioning. And if they're doing that when they're talking to you, what the hell are they doing in their head on a regular basis? Right? So I don't want to hear from people that, well, in a real fight, I'm going to, when they can't drop something that Uncle Bob said to them when they were 14 and they keep dwelling on it. I don't want to hear it because they obviously have a problem switching mental gears and keeping themselves like in a position where they can actually function. Right? So anyway, right? So how does the mind fail us under stress? Okay. One, what do I have over here? Okay? So this is the, what did I say this was? It's the adrenal response, but is the, we'll call it the transition from civil to barbaric. Sorry, okay? From civil to primitive. How about that? Okay, so there's a lag time. Okay, there's a lag time. So we've got the freeze response. What else we got? Delayed decision making. Okay. So freeze response, not just here. You ever seen somebody just like, they're not frozen, looking around, they're moving, they might be pacing, trying to, but their brain stopped. What are you looking for? I don't know. I don't know what to do. Well, thank God you can at least speak, because some can't. Okay? So it's not just the body. The brain locks up, right? I forgot what to do. And then you got your ass handed to you. And if that's the luckiest thing, awesome. Okay? Delayed decision making is we could be bouncing things back and forth, whatever. Okay? Again, I'll talk about these things a little bit more. Cognitive shutdown, just complete cognitive shutdown. That means the processing just stops. Okay. Yeah. So freeze response, the mind gets stuck. Okay. Trying to analyze the situation instead of acting, or it just, right. Okay. And then delayed decision making, if you haven't trained automatic reactions, your brain will hesitate while trying to recall a plan. One of the first lessons that I want a student to have in the first 100 hours of training, okay, is automatic response. And that automatic response revolves around getting out of this space. As soon as they either don't know what to do or they have any of these things that go on, they just get out of that spot. At that 100 hours, though, I want them to be able to, at a minimum, go to one of the base kamae. And the two that I prefer that they would go to is either hira or ichimonji. So they're not just clearing the space, but they're closing things off, and that becomes the new flinch response. Because if they can do that, when the brain's not functioning to make a decision for you, the automatic response is I go to this position so that I'm already closed off, and it makes it harder and harder for him to get me with the next thing. Okay? So when I don't know what to do, I go to kamae. Okay? It becomes an automatic response. It becomes the new flinch response and replaces what the cave process was that we were born with. Okay? And then cognitive shutdown, too many competing sensory inputs cause the brain to default to panic mode, right? Like we move and then we see, because we've done all this Henko work, man. Like you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, you could do this, but we never learned how to fucking prioritize. So we all proud that we have all this stuff, and then we get out of the way under pressure, and the brain goes, and you can't move because the part of the brain that decides which limb moves to catch that target, it's being fed too much information. Okay, so requires a very different type of training, right? So training adjustments here, what are we talking about, right? So training with pre-scripted responses so that under stress you don't think, you react, right? So this is pre-trained responses. I already gave you one, okay? As soon as you can't decide, your brain stops, or you forgot what you were going to do, move to come because what's important at that moment? Get the hell out of this spot because that's where the next shit's coming. That's where they're targeting, okay? So, and then another one is to just keep moving, okay? Just keep moving. All right, number two, use stress exposure drills, hence Friday's class, right? To get comfortable making decisions under pressure. Okay? Stress drills. Okay? So far too many people, right? I can't think straight. There's too much stuff going on. Pick something. Anything is moving forward. Okay? And then the last one we'll do is reduce choices in a crisis. Okay? Too many options create mental overload. Okay? So one of the things I require of my people testing for Shodan, and yes, they have to test. I don't just give them a fucking rank. Okay? Is all of their basics, Mushadori, Ganset, whatever. Okay? When they avoid something that's coming in, they need to know what the proper setup is. Like, when do they even have that as an option? Right? I'll give you an example, and I don't have a partner to train with me, but let's say we're doing the Mushadori, right? This uplifting, scooping, elbow, shoulder dislocation kind of thing, right? And so once we've gotten over all the bullshit stuff, like trying to wrap it, all that kind of stuff that actually exposes you to untrained people blowing your own shoulder out, right? So let's say he just does a basic thing. He reaches out here, grabs my shoulder, and I shift into position, right? So the basic model says that from right here, I just shift over his arm, scoop around, and take him, right? Except that by feel, intuitively, how do I know that that's even an option? Okay, well, his arm's like right there, and it's bent, and your arm's right here, and yeah, no, if he reached in to grab this way, and when I moved, my arm descends underneath his forearm. As soon as I start to try, I can't get that around. I'm going to have to move to a different angle to access that, so that I haven't created a situation where, because as soon as I move and he gets that tactile response, what's he going to do? Tense up to keep that from happening. So I have to have a clean pathway. So there's a little bit where I could be touching. This is not going to matter. As I start to move, it doesn't matter if he tenses up. But what's too much, what's too little, that kind of thing. That's what I mean by setup. Okay? It's not just, well, there's an opening and there's a bend and I'm just going to grab his arm. Right? There's a reason that we run into problems where, the person goes, like, why is it working? Why is it not working? Okay? Depends on your level. Okay? So we're going to reduce choices. Okay? At any given moment, you should have 2 or 3 good opportunities, but you want to reduce those things. Right? Just like you want to reduce his with your movements. Okay? So you know exactly what to look for. Because under pressure, you give the brain too much. That, like, most people that have a problem in sparring and don't know what to do technique-wise, right? It's because they're looking for anything. Like, I don't know what he could do, right? Well, stop looking for everything or anything. What am I supposed to look for? What does he have access to? And if you know what he has access to and he goes after something else, that's a good indicator about his fight level and what he's actually paying attention to. Okay? Doesn't make him not dangerous. It just means that, right? He's not very strategic. He's not very tactical. Okay? So yeah, it'll hit if he hurts you, or it'll hurt if he hits you, but it doesn't make him, the super killer that you made him out to be in your shadow mind. Okay? So anyway, there's different masters look at things differently and look for different things than the beginner and intermediate student does. Okay? So if we're going to make that transition out of the mechanical, simple, I got me some moves kind of thing, we have to learn to think differently. Okay? No different than poor people hating the rich, because poor people think that rich people do with their money what poor people would do with money. Think about it completely differently. Well, he must be cheating. Maybe he just understands how it works better than everybody else, and he doesn't make dumbass expenditure decisions. I'm not saying the ones who don't, buy Lamborghinis and all that kind of shit aren't making dumbass decisions, but the way the person who's producing the results that we would like to get, but we're pissed off because we can't, because, well, it's our lot in life or it's whatever, right? The reason they're able to produce that is not just because they have more resources and shit that I don't have or whatever. What they have is a perspective on things that I don't have. They're looking at things, for things, and recognizing things that I don't know what to look for. I don't even know it exists. So instead of thinking, what do they know that I don't know, and then getting an education in that freaking direction, it's just easier for people to piss and moan. Okay? Not my opinion. Hatsumi Sensei said it, as a ninja, it's our responsibility to be rich. A lot of people didn't like that conversation either. So, all right, number 3, energy leaks and inefficiency. Oh, I was just talking about that. Right? So energy leaks, just talked about that all last week. Energy leaks and, what did you say? Inefficiency. Right? That means we're doing a shit ton of stuff. It's just not producing the return on investment in time, effort, energy, whatever, as a payoff. Okay? So back to that rich dad, poor dad kind of thing, right? Rich people buy assets. Assets are things that make money for you. So when they buy property that they're going to rent out to businesses or to other people. They provide housing, whatever, right? They create jobs. There's a feedback loop, right? Every dollar spent produces 2 or 3 or 5. Okay? Poor people buy shit. They buy stuff, right? That doesn't do anything for them other than egoistic, like, look at my new watch, look at my new big TV, whatever. I'm not saying that you shouldn't enjoy it. I'm not saying anything like that, right? But before we try to figure out, like, who's raping who, it's just like this. It's just like this realm, right? The master's not the master because he's trickier. The master's the master because he's controlling more things than we know are even controllable, or that we even know that are happening. And he has already trained to not let this shit get in the way. So he's not trying to be faster, stronger. That's why most people in the martial arts or the fight world or whatever are has-beens by their mid-30s. Hell, in the karate fight world, you're in the senior class depending on the organization, between 32 and 35. Holy fuck, I'm 62. I'm still moving pretty friggin' well. Right? But I'm not going to get in a fight tournament. One, morality, because I'm not willing to do stuff to another human being for a check or a trophy. Right? But they're having a harder and harder time keeping up with the new guy that's mid-20s or whatever. Right? So how does somebody 32, 35, 40, 50, 60, whatever, right, get the jump on? Well, it's not speed. It's not prowess. It's outthink the motherfucker. We go from being a technician to being a tactician, which we do things to set up the technique so that it's easier for us to execute it and he can't stop it. And then we become a strategist, which means we make him do all the heavy lifting. So then it doesn't matter if I exert pressure or he resists to get out or try to counter it, he breaks himself. It's a completely different way of thinking about it. Okay? So anyway, so let's say learn me something. Yeah, okay. Are we talking techniques? What are we talking? Right? So here, what we're talking about here is when, and we're going back up to this adrenal response, right? When under the adrenal stress, movement becomes inefficient unless properly trained. Okay? Less properly trained. A lot of people think that more is better. I'm not saying it's not. Depends on the fight. But why does it have to be me? It could be I just introduce a weapon in. well, that's not fair. Like, I'm an arm man. Why don't you just put that weapon down? We can just see how this is going to work. No, I think this is pretty fucking interesting just the way it is. Okay? So now instead of me trying to figure out how to not let you beat the shit out of me, you need to figure out how to get to me without running into my friend here. It's completely different. Okay? So the dangers of wasted movement. This is important. Okay? Overexertion without control. Okay? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about wasted energy. Is that right? Yeah, wasted energy. Okay. Here's an example of wasted energy standing perfectly still. Under the fight, flight, or freeze mechanism, right? Most people, when they say fight or flight, right? If we're scared, right? Flight is tiny Nikes don't fail me now, right? If we're under the flight, or under the fight kind of thing, right? That thing happens and we go hands on, right? But have you ever seen somebody who was freaking terrified, just standing there, just like shaking in place, right? It's just trembling, right? Same amount of energy for fight and flight, just don't know where to go. It's just cooking itself off, okay? So under the adrenal response, remember we talked about shaking hands, we talked about heart rate going up, all of these things. We're burning off calories, we're burning off, right? We're cooking energy. We are like a battery. Yes, it's rechargeable, but we have a finite amount in that scenario. Okay, so this goes to energy conservation and that kind of stuff, right? So overexertion without control, lack of coordination. Okay, so overexertion, right? This is everything from jumping around like a freaking jackrabbit on a hot tin roof or on crack or whatever, right? Or doing one of these things where I'm going to be jumping around and trying to showboat before the fight even starts. Well, you go ahead and do that. Okay? You just cook off that energy so that when you start coming at me, one of us is more fresh than the other one. Okay. What else did I say? Lack of coordination. Okay. Every time we miss, every time we grab them and we're out of alignment and more muscles have to kick in to be just as strong or to try to hold them. Every time we take a shot, right? More energy down. It's just like those games, right? Except that, you've got the hit points and the energy bar going down and all that kind of stuff. Kind of, but not quite, right? So unnecessary tension, right? That's these arts that are, okay? So that's why we're always trying to figure out, and I did a whole week on this, right? The balance between tension and relaxation, right? I want to be relaxed to conserve energy, but there's a certain minimal amount of tension that's required to land that shock with shock force to cause damage, to shut this guy down. Too much, I bleed off extra energy. Too little, I have to put more energy in to fire it up. Right? So there's this balance. Again, this is where that previous class kind of ties in. Right? So there's that tension, relaxation, balance kind of thing. Right? Okay. So again, back to this: overexertion without control. Sudden, untrained movements burn oxygen and energy faster than necessary. Okay? Lack of coordination, shaky hands, clumsy footwork, poor balance, right? From adrenal dumps, right? Lead to ineffective movement. The reason for that is if we have poor balance, right? The faster we go, things get herky-jerky and we lose that alignment, right? Everything's good when we're doing like slow, soft training. It's all good, right? Okay? But as soon as things pick up, right? If the body's moving off balance, we can't feel it. But your brain is sending signals to support muscles all over the place to try to keep your spine aligned and to keep you in a position where you're neutralizing gravity. It's not going to move you back to center. It's just what it's doing is keeping you from falling down. If a lot of people, the way they walk, if their body wasn't correcting for this out of alignment kind of position, nature says they should fall down because gravity is always exerting a force on us. Okay? Again, you didn't have to get straight A's in science class in middle school for this. Okay? All right. So training adjustments. Okay? Train short, efficient bursts of movement rather than complex multi-step sequences. Okay? So there's this glycogen spike. Right? What we're doing is controlling the glycogen spike. Okay? What that means is that in our muscles, we have a type of sugar called glycogen. And it allows us to do things like wind sprints, like we're jogging along. Also, we want to just go like balls to the wall and just go, right? And that'll last for about, depending on your fitness level, your size of your muscles, how much you've been doing, that kind of stuff, right? 7 to 11 seconds. Okay, it's like a rocket booster burn. And then you've cooked off the glycogen, and you got to go back to jogging or pace walking or whatever to let the body put more glycogen back in, and then you can wind sprint again. Okay, it's the same thing here, right? So if I can operate within my glycogen peaks and then stay out of range or relax things that I'm not currently using to affect him, right? During the glycogen replenishment kind of thing, then I can go longer, right? I'm not going to go longer balls to the wall kind of thing, right? You can see this in MMA fights when guys are going at it. You'll see this flurry of action, and then they'll kind of lock in and hold. And just as you're about to get bored, they go into a flurry, and then they kind of lock, right? So the problem with this is that they're both trying to use their glycogen spikes at the same time. Okay. The trick with that kind of stuff is when he's applying his glycogen spikes, I need to do whatever I need to. Let's say it's a bear hug, right? I'm going to fire certain things to make sure I can breathe. Okay. But he just grabbed me, right? He's new in this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire those muscles, keeping him from crushing my rib cage and to allow me to breathe. Okay. But everything else, I'm going to relax as much as possible, because 7 to 11 seconds in, I'm going to feel his muscles stop moving. He may not feel like he got weaker, but I'm going to feel that change. And that means he ran out of glycogen, right? And now I can do my thing because he's in a holding pattern. And if I'm attacking the same things he just wore out, how long is a self-defense situation? 2 to 10 seconds, okay? So that's average, right? Might last longer than that. You know, it's less than 2 seconds, right? Bang, right? So as long as we have that, we're good, right? So we're going to train short, efficient burst of movement rather than the complex multi-step sequences, that kind of thing, right? Number 2, build muscle memory for economy of motion. Remove unnecessary tension. The amount of redundancy training that has to be done, most people won't do because it's fucking boring, right? I've done my Sanshin. I've done my, I know how to go to Kamae. Yeah, but have you gone to Kamae past the point where you're bored? Past the point where, oh God, if I fucking do this again, I'm just going to throw up all over the place. I don't care, right? Do it to the point that when somebody comes up and startles you, that's what comes out as your flinch response. If you don't do that, you have to burn off brain stuff, go to Kamae, you have to fumble around, make sure you're in the right spot, all that kind of stuff. We need to make sure that we're getting this in muscle memory. Okay? We train for muscle memory. Right? I say this a different way in class. We don't stop training once we get the technique right. We stop training that thing or that move or whatever when we can't get it wrong. As long as you have to think about it. Okay? And the third thing is conditioning yourself for progressive fatigue training so movement doesn't fall apart when energy drops. What if the fight goes past 10 seconds, 2 minutes, whatever, okay? So we condition ourselves for that, right? Okay, so fatigue training. Okay, fatigue training. All right, so I just talked about this during the energy conservation stuff. Deal with something, take this guy down, right? And somebody else could come rushing in, okay? So if I learn to control the distance, keep him away before he can put some hands on me or whatnot, right? And get some of that glycogen back, some of that energy back, some oxygen in there and whatnot. If not, well, then I also see all these things cross over, okay? Because that automatic response might be, instead of just taking up a damn kamae, how about if I recognize that the kamae is an attack? So when he comes in, I don't just point my fingertips at his eyes. I recognize that Ichimonji is an unarmed form of a spear posture or a sword posture, Seigan no Kamae. And so when he comes in, I don't just point at him. I target his face or his eyes. Okay? very different, right? The way we practice all the time is the way that shit's coming out. So be careful being too relaxed or too lackadaisical, or keeping your head in, I'm just training mode. In a real fight, I would. Nope, doesn't work that way. All right, very quickly here. Number 4 is threat perception errors. We make perception errors all the time. We think somebody was talking about something, but they were really talking about something else. They walked into our presence. We don't like them. They always say the same thing all the time, so we short circuit it, right? Before you fucking say that, I'm gonna, right? And then like I was just gonna say good morning, but the boss is standing over there, and now you're the one who looks like an asshole, okay? Or might be having to pack up your shit and go find another job, okay? So what we're talking about here is what the difference between what we think we see versus what's actually going on, what's reality, okay? So under high stress, going back to this, the brain does not process information normally. So unless we've trained under that pressure and understand the difference in the way the body operates, the way the brain processes things and whatnot, then okay? It's like people sitting around the freaking table and talking about how, did you see that that fight that happened? It was not a fight, but an attack, right? In the news. And man, if that were me, right? It's the same thing with people sitting around talking about how they'd cure all the ills of the world if they were king, kind of thing, right? But they have no idea about the decision making and variables and all that, right? So anybody sitting around talking about that kind of stuff, those of us who have been inside that bubble know that the logic that goes on inside that bubble is often 180 degrees from the logic that goes on when we're just having a conversation, right? Because the processing is different, right? So here's how our senses deceive us, right? This is about understanding the senses, okay? So there's lots of ways to do this, and if anybody has any of the Hayes books, I believe it's in it's probably now the Complete Ninja with all that shit shoved together. But originally it was the O'Hara series, and there were individual books, volume 1, 2, 3, that kind of thing, right? So in volume 1, Spirit of the Shadow Warrior, back in the psychological training section, there is an exercise for focusing on your senses and taking 1 sense per day just over the course of a week, and focusing on sight, focusing on sound, and not only seeing how they function and noticing things that you didn't notice before or whatever, but also how they can be deceived, okay? So, but for them to be deceived, either the person has to be proactively doing it, but usually what ends up happening is we are either lackadaisical in our processing of what's going on in our world, or we make a lot of assumptions. Like, somebody says, hey, check out that tree. Dude, it's a tree. You've seen one tree, you've seen them all. Okay, so you're not looking at that tree. You just, whenever you look at a tree, you just think there's just an overlay that goes over it. And, okay, except that tree happens to be falling on you, but I only take snapshots, so okay. So anyway, but we're talking about here how this is working under this adrenal response, right? So 1 is tunnel vision. Okay, tunnel vision. Okay, 2 is auditory exclusion. Just going through the senses. Auditory exclusion, distorted time perception. Talk about that one here in a minute. Distortion or distorted time, and fixation on a single threat. Hyper focus. Okay, so this time distortion thing, some of you know that in my alter ego, right? I'm a workplace violence consultant. And sometimes I'm called upon to assess statements or depositions that a victim of the violence would have been required to go through or whatever, right? And so very often, right, the countering lawyer is they're the interrogator, and this is a big point that keeps coming up, but it's a huge flag for me when it does. Okay. Where they will go, well, how long did the incident occur? I don't know. Well, this is an easy question. I mean, it had 2 seconds, 10 minutes. What? I don't know. Okay, that tells me that the person was actually in this state. Okay, somebody goes, I don't know, 20, 30 seconds, and you're trying to claim that, dude, I didn't mean that. Not buying it. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right? So tunnel vision, right? Adrenaline narrows your field of view, right? It makes peripheral attacks harder to see. Okay? Auditory exclusion, loud noises, right? Like a gunshot or shouting can cause you to actually go deaf temporarily. Okay? Which is really, really cool if you can reverse engineer that, right? You get in and you're like getting ready to do a rear hip throw to somebody and just turn and scream into their ear. Okay? That will distort a whole shit ton of stuff. It'll cause muscles to tense up, all kinds of things, but they're not going to hear you moving. So one of the ways to become a little bit less visible or whatever, even if you're not like executing a technique, maybe I'm just avoiding, I'm evading, and I'm passing my hand around their body. I usually pass my hands around the midsection right here because it's where people who might be packing something, knife, gun, whatever, it's either in a hoodie pocket or it's in a waistband. Same thing with a knife, might be on the right. So I'll do a heel movement and pass around behind them, but I've lightly touched them because I'm doing a pat down without them knowing that I'm doing a pat down. And on the way by, that's what I'm going to yell, hey, really loud, right in their freaking ear, turn into a megaphone. Okay, so I can reverse engineer these things and strip of them of some of their senses and take them away. Same thing with targeting Q-show, right? Make things numb. Right? Not only can they not feel so well when I'm touching them and get good feedback to the brain for countering it, but they also they can't grab so well and whatnot, right? So really, really cool stuff. Okay, distorted time perception, talked about that, right? Things seem to move faster or slower than they actually are, okay? And then fixation on a single threat. This is where the brain locks onto one danger and then ignores secondary threats that might be around. We're going to do a drill on Friday that does that kind of thing, right? It's going to suck. It's supposed to suck. Okay? So training adjustments. Use stress drills with multi-directional threats to force awareness to peripheral dangers. Okay? It forces the functions of your brain that are managing the environment to expand, to open up, so that we're not doing this. Okay? So this is multi-directional stress inducers, right? Number 2, learn to break fixation and scan for additional threats in real time. I've already done certain things like that, right? Where this punch is coming in and I hit, and then I move to change my field of vision, right? So yes, he's going to have to track me and come in, but what I'm doing is not just paying attention to him. I want to move so that I can also kind of get a sense of what's going on in the environment around me. Okay, so break fixation. Okay, and then last one I have here for you is simulate high pressure environments to train adaptability under confusion when the brain is confused. Okay, so high pressure environments, training. Right. So what this means is there could be other students or teachers standing around as bystanders or whatnot, and I don't know if anybody's coming in or not coming in or whatever, because we also need to train in a way where it doesn't happen all the time. Okay, because ego can cheat, right? If we know that like he's throwing this attack and then somebody else is going to come in, right? I can go hyper vigilant, and then I can end up being confused. But at the same time, since I know it's going to happen, I'm already looking for it, except in a real situation, you don't know what the hell it's going to look like. So, but when I'm dealing with this, at any point during it, somebody could say something, somebody could yell at me, somebody could throw something at me, somebody might come in and put hands on me at any stage of that defense, right? So I need to learn to parse my perceptual faculties so I'm not just tunnel vision on this guy, okay? All right, and then the big one here. Quick. All right, spiritual / belief-based limitations. Okay, I consider anything spiritual that is spiritual, right, or that cannot be easily tagged into a mental function. Just beliefs. Okay, beliefs. Okay, so this is your mind is your greatest weapon or your worst enemy. This is pre-established beliefs, expectations, or whatever that you brought with you, that as soon as they don't happen, shit falls apart. Okay, it's like building all of your defense mechanisms and whatnot, and all your skills on a house of cards, and then all it's going to take is for one to be knocked out, and the whole thing falls apart. Okay, so here's how your mind responds under these conditions. Okay, so the mind is not just affected by physical stress and adrenaline; it's also shaped by deeply ingrained beliefs. Okay, it's shaped by self-imposed limitations, and it's shaped by emotional attachments. So everything from self-doubt to expectations, beliefs about the way the world works or any given person is, or whatever, right? Okay. So when faced with real danger, though, these mental constructs can override instinct, they can delay action, or they can force a person into hesitation. Okay, because they expected one thing, something else happens. Okay, if you've been following this series for a while or been on any of my training or anything, often I pull out this one experience from a bunch of years ago where we're all having this discussion and we're talking about different things, and they go, I don't know, man. I just like if I can't start with this particular like move or pattern, I'm lost. Okay, well, make sure you pass out a whole bunch of flyers that, like, if you're ever targeting me, please come at me this way. Okay. So what we have are a couple of different traps here, right? The hesitation trap. Well, we'll start off with doubt. Okay, doubt kills. Right. So if a person isn't mentally convinced that they have the right to act in their defense, right, they will hesitate at the worst possible moment. If they doubt their skills, if they doubt their ability to apply those skills. I've had friggin' black belts, not mine. I've had black belts. We're often in parades and stuff. We'll pass out coupons for classes and stuff, and somebody will go, oh, no, thanks, I already have a black belt. Oh, okay. Where do you train? Well, I've trained since I was 9 years old. Okay, so you earned a black belt decades ago. You're not a black belt. But they'll go, I still remember some of my stuff, but I know how I am under pressure. I don't even know if I could use the stuff. I'm not the guy to be admitting that to. You should be admitting that to anybody. Just like a cop once told me that, they don't worry about self-defense stuff because they carry a gun. I go, I teach that stuff too. And they go, between me and you, I couldn't hit the broadside of a bar. Not the fucking thing you tell people. Jesus criminy. Holy shit. Okay. I don't know if that's better or worse than bragging that you have skills that you don't fucking have. Okay. Anyway, over-analysis paralysis, right? Some people freeze because they're too attached to finding the perfect technique instead of simply surviving. Right? I don't know if I have that. Right. Okay. And then the other one that could stop them or cause hesitation is guilt or morality loops. Okay. If somebody's not, if you haven't already accepted the reality that survival may require hurting another person or worse, right? That person's mind will reject the action when the moment arrives, and that's the solution. Or other people are going to die. Okay? So, how the senses deceive you. So here, this is mind, this is senses, this is multiple stuff, right? This is kind of like doing the Godai, right? You hit void could, all kinds of stuff right here, right? So the senses can deceive you. Your mind will create false reasons to delay action, okay? Maybe this person isn't really a threat. They love me. They're not going to hurt me that badly, that kind of thing. Or this ties into the doubt thing as well, okay? Like I go through my life never even considering that grandma or my wife or whatever could actually come in my direction to hurt me. Except that once I start recognizing things like Alzheimer's or dementia, those kind of things where they're not them anymore. They don't even know who the hell I am. And now they're like worried and triggered because I'm a stranger in their space. Interactions with medication, pain levels that I've never seen them at, fear, those kind of things, right? Okay. So is it probable? Probably not, right? But to completely write it off and then it's happening, we might not act on them because it's, to us, it's them. That becomes problematic, right? If I just talk my way out of this, I won't have to act, right? I don't want to overreact and look bad. Might get fired, those kind of things, right? We may fixate on avoiding the worst outcome rather than making the best move. Okay, things like, if I hit first, I may get in legal trouble. If I run, I might look weak. If I move now, I might mess up the technique. Okay? Well, all that shit while you're narrating to yourself, right? Like you're the narrator in your own documentary. We're on our own way. Okay, so and we may second guess our own capability, right? What if I fail? Haven't trained enough for this. I don't think I can actually hurt them. Whatever. Okay, so the reality check here is if you hesitate in a life or death moment because of mental conflict, you may not get a second chance. Okay, so training adjustments here is all about breaking free of mental barriers. Okay, so developing the mindset and doing mindset training before we ever have to be there. Okay, so decide now, right, that you are willing to do what you need to do to survive. Right, you cannot wait until the moment arrives to wrestle with morality and doubt and all that shit. Okay, adopt a survival-based perspective. Right? If it's not about wanting to, I don't want to fight. Okay? I detest fighting, but I will fight for my life or to save somebody else. Right? So it's about making sure you go home alive. Right? But I also don't teach fighters. Anybody who wants to be that trophy belt bragging guy? No, I teach warrior protectors. Okay? It's a very different mindset. Okay? And then train pre-fight or train pre-incident visualization exercises. See yourself, right, moving instantly and without hesitation. Rewire the inner picture that we have of ourselves. Right? I'm not writing all that shit down. Okay. There's other things here too: emotional detachment from technique and outcome, and then we can do scenario drills that force commitment. Running out of time here, so we'll throw this last thing up here because I promised it. Right, which is how to fix these cannot do's. Right, because this is a whole bunch of shit. This is a lot. So this is here so we can identify during stress training what comes up for me, what comes up for you. Might not be the same things. Okay, and then once I have it, right, then I can actually do something about it. So I have a 3-step fix framework, right, to give you. Right, so the first one I just talked about, right, identify it. Okay? ID it, identify it. Okay. What gaps in your ability would cause you to fail under pressure? You got to find them. You don't know. Don't guess. You don't know until you start pressure testing things, right? 2, pressure test it, right? Not just we're discovering it, and some of you might already know, right? But there's a little loop here, right? So we start to pressure test things start to bubble up, so I'm identifying it, right? But I need to know how deep that goes, so I know what kind of thing is it, right? Is it a processing thing where it's like that cognitive gap where I need to do more so that it gets smaller, it won't go away, but now I need to, what can I put in that gap? Like come my evasion or step out of this space or keep moving or whatever, so that it's not going to go away. So how can I put something in place that'll work with it, right? So the pressure tested, right, is to know what type it is and what I need to do as a fix. Okay, so find a way to experience and measure it in real-time training. And then the third one is reprogram your response. Reprogram. Okay, so we want to train specifically to eliminate hesitation and create automatic, efficient action in that area. And the cool thing is that while this looks simple, right, it is, because if you look at all of these, right, what you're ending up with is hesitation and immobilization problems because of. So we only have to come up with a handful of answers to cover, keep the energy going, keep the energy up, right? put something in place when the brain stalls, right? The scripted kind of thing. And what was the other one? Anyway. Oh, and be able to continue to operate as well as possible under pressure. That's it. Okay. All right. So let's close this up. All right. So the question really is will you still be able to move, right? When things happen, right? It's one thing to train a technique in the dojo. It's another to apply it when your body is fighting against you, right? So we broke down the hidden gaps. We took a look at a bunch of these things that, in all honesty, never gets touched in martial arts and self-defense training. Okay. Or if it does come up, somebody tells you, oh, you just got to work through that, man. You train harder. That'll go away. How the fuck do I make it go away? Or is it something that won't go away and I have to figure out a workaround? Okay. So anyway, this is where things springboard off to the Friday virtual training, right? So what we are doing on Friday is we're doing the reality check. Okay. So we're going to be doing 3 primary drills or exercises to be able to answer the questions. Can you move when your balance is gone? Can you think when your vision and hearing is compromised? Can you execute when your hands are trembling? Can you make sense out of overwhelming input and conflicting data, right? So we're going to take some high stress conditions, specifically these pressure testing kind of things, right? That we covered during this session, and we're going to put them into real world movement drills. Okay, so it'll be cool. It'll be cool, right? So if you're in for the live training, you're going to be able to feel exactly what your body will do when it counts. And if you're in on the virtual stuff, you're going to get lots of fodder. So you can take it back to your training group. You can work with your training partners, or you can at least keep it in mind so that you can maybe I'll have an even more imperative why to do more than just, I don't know, video training or whatever. Okay. Anyway, I am way out of time. Hopefully this works for you. Giving you plenty, right? Whether you train with me or anybody else, whatever, just know that this is a virtually untouched no man's land or no women's land, right? In martial and self-defense training. This is the stuff that you're not going to find in the Densho. You're not going to find in the Makimono, because those things were not written for people that weren't clear about this shit already. Okay. So that's what I have. Hopefully this worked well for you. In the comments below, put what your biggest aha moment was. If there's a certain area that you struggle with or whatever, and you have a question about that. I try to check these things as often as possible. Doesn't always work well. I try to get to them within 24 to 48 hours. It takes a little bit longer. Have some patience, Nin, okay? And then try to help you out, okay? If you're one of my students, you have direct access. So I will talk to everybody again real soon, all right? So hopefully I'll see you on Friday. If not, I'll see you